Hello everyone, this is Maki. Today we are going to analyze the history of the Gundam Seed series. However, we'll be discussing the history before the events depicted in the story. The history of the cosmic era is very detailed. I hope to introduce it in several parts. For the first part, let's study the impact of the coordinated technology on the world and the birth of plant. Why did the war break out? What happens after the story of the movie Gundam Seed Freedom? By analyzing the events of the past, we may be able to discover some key elements. The world of the Seed series is portrayed as an extension of real-world history. Unlike G Gundam or Gundam Wing, it is set in a different worldview from the concept of a history where humanity has already expanded into space and established a certain level of culture. So how did we go from the history of our real world to the history of Seed? At the end of the Gregorian calendar era, World War III breaks out. The exact date of World War III is not set and is left to the interpretation of the audience. By the end of the Gregorian calendar era, the depletion of oil resources and worsening environmental pollution plunged the global economy into a severe recession. To deal with this situation, the world's major powers divided the earth into several blocks for joint governance. The confusion of national integration and reorganization escalated into a major war. Ethnic and religious conflicts intensified, and a storm of war and chaos swept across the globe. This series of upheavals came to be known as the War of Reconstruction. The world's turmoil wasn't limited to war. A mysterious disease called typhus influenza also spread throughout the world, causing numerous deaths. Eventually, the era of the Gregorian calendar ended and the cosmic era began. Surprisingly, the cosmic era did not begin with the end of the war. In the midst of the Reconstruction War, nuclear weapons were used in a battle in Central Asia. Fearing the outbreak of a full-scale nuclear war, people began to strongly desire an end to the conflict. In later times, the event in Central Asia would be called the Last Nuke. The year of Cosmic Era 1 was designated as the year in which this last nuke was used. Witnessing an event that could have dealt a fatal blow to humanity, people managed to avoid extinction through their own reasoning. This is similar to how Zaft soldier Ryuki stopped Patrick Zaw from firing Genesis during the final battle of Seed. This is a scene that reflects the idea of history repeating itself. In Cosmic Era Year 9, the war came to an end and major organizations such as the Atlantic Federation, the Eurasian Federation, and the Republic of East Asia were formed on Earth. In Cosmic Era Year 9, the Cosmic Era was also officially established as the unified calendar for the entire Earth. As I mentioned earlier, the year in which the last nuke was used was internationally declared as Cosmic Era Year 1. The establishment of this new era was done with the hope that people would never forget their mistakes. The construction of the International Space Station, which had been halted by the World War, was resumed. The name of this International Space Station is Ozo. After that space exploration and the development of space colonies began in earnest, and the construction of Copernicus, a facility for the procurement of materials and the assembly of space exploration equipment on the moon, began. In Cosmic Era Year 11, the space station also was completed. Furthermore, in Cosmic Era Year 12, the lunar city Copernicus was completed. Copernicus, where Kira and Aslan lived as children, is the moon city that was completed at that time. Space exploration continued to progress. The Federal High Altitude Space Bureau, led by the Atlantic Federation, invited George Glenn to join them. It was then that George Glenn, an important figure in the Seed series, appeared on the stage of history. George Glenn was born 16 years before the beginning of the Cosmic Era. As depicted in the TV anime, he was a coordinator born through genetic manipulation. However, no information was given about the scientists who created George as a coordinator. At the age of 17, he graduated from medical school at a prestigious global university. He won a silver medal in the Olympic Games and also excelled as a star player in American football. In Cosmic Era Year 4, George was nominated for a Nobel Prize. He also joined the Navy in Cosmic Era Year 5. Interestingly, in the TV anime, Rara Cruiser mentions that George was an ace pilot in the Air Force. George Glenn was a hero admired by many. And it is this George who would eventually become a figure who would profoundly change the course of history. In Cosmic Era Year 15, the Jupiter return ship Tsiolkovsky was completed. The Tsiolkovsky was equipped with a newly developed spacesuit. This spacesuit, equipped with an exoskeleton and auxiliary power, was called the mobile suit. It could be considered the ancestor of the mobile suits that would later appear as weapons. As the Tsiolkovsky began its journey to Jupiter, George Glenn confessed to the world that he was a coordinator and revealed the technology behind the creation of coordinators to the entire world. Naturally, the world descended into chaos. After unveiling the technology, George Glenn set off on a 14-year round-trip research voyage to Jupiter. How did the world respond to the chaos? Religious communities around the world condemned the technology as a forbidden act that trespasses on God's domain, and sought to suppress it as heresy. They even strictly forbade access to the data. It was during this time that Blue Cosmos also appeared on the historical stage. Blue Cosmos had existed before George Glenn's revelation, advocating the preservation of the natural environment. After the disclosure, however, they publicly declared their opposition to coordinated technology. At the time, Blue Cosmos' largest supporting organization was the Azrael Foundation. The family of Miruta Azrael, who appeared in the CTV anime, was already a major supporter of Blue Cosmos. In response to the chaos, the global community convened a large meeting known as the United Nations Conference on the Development of Genetic Resources. Here it was concluded that all forms of human genetic manipulation would be strictly prohibited. George Glenn's parting words, "I hope someone will follow in my footsteps," were ultimately rejected by the world. The meeting also decided that the response to George Glenn would be discussed after the return of the Jupiter mission. In the midst of the global turmoil, some of the wealthy elite secretly applied the coordinated technology to their own children. In the year 17 of the Cosmic Era, the first act of terrorism against the coordinators took place. A hospital that had been secretly involved in the creation of the coordinators was attacked, and doctors, nurses, and patients were brutally massacred. The organization behind the attack was never revealed. Reporters speculated that Blue Cosmos might have been involved, but no hard evidence was found. In cosmic era year 22, George Glenn and the Jupiter exploration team reached the Jupiter region. There they discovered evidence 0, 1 in the meteorite. The possibility of extraterrestrial intelligent life once again threw the world into chaos. The Tsiolkovsky was ordered to bring evidence 0, 1 back to Earth. That same year, in cosmic era 22, Sigurd Klein was born on Earth in the Kingdom of Scandinavia. He was secretly created as a coordinator. Also in cosmic era 23, Patrick Saul was born in the Atlantic Federation. He was also a secretly created coordinator. Finally, in cosmic era 29, George Glenn returned from Jupiter. He was temporarily imprisoned. The decision of the aforementioned United Nations Conference on the Development of Genetic Resources was carried out. Evidence 1 was analyzed and investigated on the space colony Zodiac. The investigation concluded that there was no evidence that it was artificially manufactured, and that it was highly probable that this organism possessed intelligence equal to or greater than that of whales. These findings shocked the world. The global religious community was thrown into further disarray. Earth-centered belief systems were fundamentally challenged. In cosmic era year 30, key figures from various religious communities held the Palestine Council to discuss and attempt to resolve the chaos caused by the discovery of evidence 0, 1. However, the discussions failed to reach a positive conclusion. People quickly lost interest in religion, and at the same time, a wave of acceptance of new technologies, including coordinators, spread throughout the world. The space exploration business quickly flourished, and space colonies were built one after another. Mendel Colony, a key location in the SEED series, was also built during this time. Mendel was one of the results of the world's acceptance of coordinated technology. In cosmic era year 31, George Glenn, who had been imprisoned, was released. This was also a result of the growing acceptance of coordinated technology. George then began his research into evidence 0, 1. The colony Zodiac, where George was reunited, grew into a massive research facility in space. In cosmic era year 35, another major event took place. It involved the lunar facility run by the Atlantic Federation. This facility was called Tormios. The Copernicus facility, whose construction began in cosmic era year 10, focused on resource mining and assembling space exploration equipment. Tormios, however, was a military base. The Atlantic Federation was widely criticized by the international community. In response, the Atlantic Federation defended itself by declaring the facility a space police force. It was also around this time that the weapon known as mobile armor was introduced to the world. Later, this Tormios base would be destroyed by Genesis under the command of Patrick Saur. The Atlantic Federation's declaration sparked an intensified space arms race among various nations. The Eurasian Federation began construction of the Artemis Space Fortress. While preparations for war were underway, George Glenn continued his efforts to build a bridge between humanity and its future. As he had stated, coordinators serve the role of mediating between present humanity and future humanity. Then, in cosmic era year 38, a new type of space colony was announced. The space colony shaped like Libra would later become known as Plant, a new habitat for humanity. Although Plant was a groundbreaking invention, it wasn't something George Grant or the people of Zodiac could build on their own. Of course, it required an enormous amount of funding and resources. The Atlantic Federation, the Eurasian Federation, and the Republic of East Asia all offered financial support for the construction of Plant. These nations, as member states, would later have significant influence in the operation of Plant. In Cosmic Era Year 44, 10 new Plant colonies were completed. One of these was Aurelius' frequent location in the Seed series. While George was shaping the future of humanity, hatred among mankind continued to grow. Coordinators secretly born around Cosmic Era Year 40 began to achieve remarkable success in fields such as science, art, and sports. As more people witnessed these results, opposition to the coordinators began to grow. Extremists from traditional religious groups with anti-coordinator views joined forces with the radical factions of the Blue Cosmos. In addition, it became known that when coordinators married and had children, their genetic advantages were passed on, creating second-generation coordinators. This revelation caused further turmoil throughout the world. Around this time, an important individual was born, Azrael. He would play a pivotal role in the world depicted in GUNDAM SEED. The Azrael Foundation was one of the financial backers of the Blue Cosmos, and of course the Azraels were part of the wealthy class. Do you remember that many of the coordinators were born into wealthy families? Azrael grew up surrounded by highly skilled coordinators and was constantly compared to them. As a natural, Azrael's resentment toward the coordinators was shaped by this upbringing. In the year 43 of the Cosmic Era, a fateful meeting took place between two historical figures. Sigurd Klein and Patrick crossed paths while participating in the construction of the new Plant colonies. It was truly a moment when history began to take a significant turn. Let's wrap up the first episode here. We've seen how George Grant worked tirelessly to pave the way for humanity's future, while the world influenced by technology and information grew more and more divided. These misunderstandings would eventually escalate into a full-scale war on a cosmic scale. Stay tuned for the next historical analysis. Thank you for watching to the end. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.